This episode of Vintage Stormfront Freaks has been previously recorded.
Awesome. Melanie Metz is joining us. Melanie has had a passion for storms since she was a young lass living in Arizona. In high school, photography became her main love. I want to know what the other love was, but anyway, she has been on the road with her camera every spring for over 20 years chasing tornadoes, which is amazing because she looks like she's 22, so I don't know how she did that. She was a chaser for Fox 9 News in Minneapolis, and Melanie was one of a pair of chasers on the WE Network Twister Sisters program. Her tornado photo graced the poster of the movie 13 Minutes, which we just watched, right? And recently, she has partnered with Girls Who Chase. Oh, there's a joke in there somewhere, but I'm going to let that go. All while winning the 2021 Storm Chaser of the Year award, capturing an astonishing 37 tornadoes last year. That is impressive.
Wow.
Hey, before we get to the main questions, Melanie, what are you drinking tonight?
That's the most important question, right?
Yes, it is.
I've got a martini, which is vodka with cranberry juice and a little raspberry bubbly water and a splash of limoncello.
I want
amazing.
to try that. I love those.
Cheers.
That looks beautiful.
Is that in celebration of 37 tornadoes last year, or what? How did you get 37?
Oh, I was on the road a lot. About 30,000 miles last season.
Oh my God. Wait, what's the time frame? Was this like all spring or the whole year?
You know what? I was on the road, well, off and on. I mean, I came back to my home in Minneapolis throughout the season, but I was on the road off and on from March through October, actually. I even saw a tornado October 24th this year.
Oh,
nice.
Wow.
I know, it was crazy. I don't always have that much time to chase, but this season I did, so I was able to get out there on any system that I wanted to.
Where was the best tornado this last year?
Well, that could be debatable, but the best couple tornadoes that I saw, the first, one of the top days for sure this year was, or last year, sorry, 2021 was in Texas on April 23rd. That day was, people refer to it as Locket, Texas, and there were 6 tornadoes that day from one incredible supercell that just kept producing. And those tornadoes, a couple of them had rainbows right next to them, and we're kicking up red dirt. In fact, right behind me, or my screen here is showing the twin tornadoes, as everyone's calling them, 2 red dusty tornadoes that developed on that storm. Yeah, it was pretty incredible. That was one of the best, as far as photography, the best photogenic tornado days.
Mm-hmm.
Now lean to the left. Lean to the left a little bit. Okay, now lean to the right. Okay,
that does look
stand
cool.
Up, sit down, fight. No.
It's amazing. Melanie, I have to ask you, because we've all storm chased. We're going out later on this year, but what are your biggest tips and biggest learnings when it comes to storm chasing that you're just like, oh my gosh, I always do this. I check this or, chart, whatever it is. What are the things, like your golden rules, when it comes to storm chasing?
Well, honestly, just persistence, really. Definitely knowing what you're doing to begin with. Analyzing the data is really important to understand what you're looking at when you're chasing the storm. But as far as, I don't know if I have any golden rules. I just usually get in my car and go and hope for the best. But I do pick my target. I spend a lot of time forecasting and figuring out where I want to head to for that day. But once I'm on the road, it's like anything can change. And that's it. That's one of the rules, to just be really flexible and to just be willing to change your target and to just adjust to the environment as necessary throughout the chase day.
Oh my God, I love that. Those are great tips. Do you chase by yourself, solo, or do you have a partner that you go out with?
Well, as was mentioned earlier in my years of chasing back in the early 2000s, I did chase with Peggy Willenberg most of the time. and we were known as the Twister Sisters. And we did that TV show, worked for Fox 9, a bunch of fun stuff, and a lot of public speaking. But for a long time now, I've been out mostly solo since about 2012. And I wasn't really like super active for a few years, but then a couple of years ago, I started to get back on the road a little more full time in the spring and summer. And now I have been chasing mostly solo while I'm out there. Once in a while, I go out with a friend. I have a good friend, Brad, and he's like a good luck charm. The first time he came chasing with me and Peggy, actually, we saw 12 tornadoes that day. So
Wow.
Oh my
Hey.
Whoa.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
that was his
Wanna go-
very first chase also. So we
He
call
like
him our
never
good luck
chased after that then, right? He was like, I'm done. It's as
He's
good as it's
got
gonna
it.
get.
Well, he became a meteorologist, so
Even
That's
better.
amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So Melanie,
Yeah.
if you're out by yourself, I would feel like you're almost a little limited on the equipment you take because you've got to drag it around with you. Like, I'm sure you have your phone, you know,
Mhm.
with radar on it and everything, but do you take a laptop besides your cameras? I'm saying, like
mhm.
laptops, phones. Do you take anything else?
Yeah, as far as equipment goes, I definitely am a little more simple than some people. I mean, I see some setups that I just blow my mind, right? They've got like 2 or 3 laptops and an iPad and lots of different cameras and extenders, like all kinds of stuff in their vehicle. And my vehicle, I like to keep it simple, as simple as I can anyway. I do bring my laptop. I need my laptop to edit video after the chase, but during the chase, I'm not using my laptop. I have really come to just use my phone and sometimes my iPad for looking at the radar, which is a little nicer on that bigger screen.
Mm-hmm.
So honestly, these days, I mean, our phones can do so much. I look at data on the phone. I take pictures with my phone. I navigate with my phone. I really
Mhm.
rely on my phone a lot, to be honest with you. And if my phone went out, I just have to go visual. And other than that, I do have, as you mentioned, my cameras, my Nikon for still photography and a GoPro on the roof and my Sony AX100 on the dash. And also I use that on a tripod as much as I can outside of the vehicle. But as far as, other equipment outside of cameras, it's really mostly my phone while I'm on the chase. It's pretty amazing what we can do these days. It wasn't
So
like
if you're-
that in the early days.
If you're using your phone all the time, have you ever been like in the right in the middle of this is the most beautiful shot and somebody calls you right in the middle of the shot?
Oh yeah, I ignore a lot of phone calls.
Busy.
It's so amazing. So it sounds like you started chasing right around the same time I did. So,
Mhm.
it's like 2001 was my first chase where I saw tornadoes and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Awesome.
It has changed, right? Like I can't
Mhm.
even, I haven't been chasing in the Midwest in a very long period of time, but that's all changing come May, right? How's it changed? Like, how's this different? Talk a little bit about that evolution and what you've seen change over that time frame.
Wow, so much has definitely changed. The first thing that comes to mind is technology, like I was just mentioning. I mean, back in the earlier days when I was started chasing, we didn't have, we barely just got mobile phones back then. I had my first cell phone and we didn't have mobile data at the time. So we couldn't be checking radar or looking at the model runs and all that stuff while we were on the road. So we'd have to stop at the library and actually use a computer at the library
Oh,
in little
wow.
towns here and there to look at updates. And of course, we had our
Yes, I've done
nowcasters.
that.
We called, oh, what was that?
Oh no, I've done that before, but going into libraries and checking the internet and everything like that and looking
Oh,
at
yeah.
everything.
Oh, I'm having such
Yep.
flashbacks. It's amazing. I'm like, I remember some of these dinky town libraries I've stopped in, and like the one person who stays back and is your nowcaster, and you
Mhm.
hope you have reception to call them. Oh my God.
Mhm. Yeah, we relied a lot on friends and that were back home and had internet and were able to look at radar even and let us know what was happening. I'll never forget one night when Peggy and I were chasing the Hallam, Nebraska tornado that actually was an EF4, really large tornado, and it was dark. We stopped to help some people after their house got hit, and luckily they were all okay, but we were helping them. And just after they were taken away, we got back in our car to leave and we couldn't see anything and another storm was coming. And one of our nowcaster friends called and he's like, you have to get out of there. This storm has rotation on it and it's coming right at you. And we're
Oh my
driving down the
God.
road and the winds are like pushing the vehicle almost into the ditch. And honestly, that was one of the few times I've actually been nervous while I was chasing because the middle of the night, we can't see anything, and we don't have radar. We can't look at the data, but our friend is telling us we better get out of there, and we were doing the best we could. But yeah, those were some interesting days back then
Wow.
without having that radar right at your hands. I mean, now we can look at our phone, so many different radar apps. I like to use Radar Scope. And look at velocity couplets. You know exactly where you are relative to where the rotation is on the storm. But that's all just, it's amazing what we have now, the ability. And actually, what that does is it really helps us to be able to chase even safer than we could before when we have that data right at our fingertips.
Oh, absolutely. I remember making a lot of dumb choices. Go ahead, Naz.
I was just gonna say, if you are chasing by yourself, what's your number one concern?
Well, it's really, I don't feel too concerned, but it has to be just distracted driving. Probably, I do my best to not look at my phone too much while I'm driving, but when I'm on a storm, I do actually go visual most of the time. I mean, that's really important to me, to be able to read the storm and be able to navigate, but I definitely still have to look at my map to know what roads are coming up and how I'm going to navigate around the storm, and check radar once in a while. So trying to chase position around the storm and looking at my phone, looking at the map and radar is really probably, that's the most difficult part as far as at least my safety is concerned, doing all of that and trying to take pictures. When I was in the passenger seat, I could take a picture while the other person's driving, but now I don't have that ability. So it makes it a little more challenging to capture the images as well when I'm chasing by myself. Definitely having a partner when I chased with Peggy, it made things easier, where most of the time I would navigate and do the photography while she would just drive. But then you really have to trust each other, because she just went where I told her to go, most of the time.
She's following your lead. But even with Radar Scope, I love it because it shows your GPS position with a storm. And I got behind one. I was in a tornado warning once, and I thought, I'm going to be super slick. I'm going to get behind this thing. I can see where my position is. I went out 2 minutes and I said, this is stupid, and went and left. Because even when I thought I was far enough away, I was not. Like, I felt like I was getting kind of pummeled at that moment. Have you ever gotten in a position where you're like, you might have had to even get out of your car and get in a ditch or something?
I haven't. Fortunately, I have not had to take shelter while I was chasing. I have been in a couple positions where I felt like I was in a little bit of a dangerous situation. As I mentioned earlier, that time in the middle of the night when that second storm came right over us with rotation and probably had a little tornado on it. But at the moment, it was like, really, there was nothing we could do in that moment. Other than that, I fortunately have not been in too many dangerous situations. And one of the days, though, when many storm chasers did end up in a situation that was quite dangerous was, as many of you know, I'm sure, the El Reno day back in 2013, when sadly Tim and others died in the tornado. So many chasers were in a position where, we try to be close to that mesocyclone, close to the tornado, but not right in it. And I know most chasers, including Tim, play it safe and they know what they're doing. But that tornado grew so quickly that everyone was caught off guard, and it changed position or changed its track so quickly while expanding into, the largest tornado ever. So in that situation, which is really rare and unusual, people were fleeing for their lives, literally. Luckily on that day, I was chasing that day, and we all had this sense that it was a really dangerous day. So our number one goal was safety, and we ended up going really far east ahead of that storm. We were on it when it initiated, and then the traffic around Oklahoma City, around El Reno, was so bad that we weren't able to go south. Everything was backed up, and we had to get south of that storm, and we weren't able to do it. So we just kept going east, and we got literally like 10 miles ahead of it. And then we finally found a road to go south. So we ended up not being right next to it like a lot of people were. We were hearing reports of what was happening. And so that was a situation where, I was definitely nervous that day, but we didn't end up in a bad situation, luckily. Although the storms did move southeast, and we were still trying to get south away from it. And traffic was still crazy, and it almost caught up to us, but the tornado had already lifted by that time. But it was still kind of freaky having it kind of chase us for a while. Yeah, I haven't had to take shelter, luckily, while I was
Good.
chasing.
Melanie, I have to ask you about how it was chasing in like as Twister Sisters. What was that like? Because you had the crew with you. So are you forecasting and you've got like several cars behind you and you're trying to keep the entire crew safe? What was that like? And first of all, how did that opportunity come into fruition as well?
The TV show?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Peggy and I had started chasing in the early 2000s, and we quickly became known as the Twister Sisters. And I think media liked that. You know, these two blonde women chasing when most of the people out in the field were men. And we were doing a pretty good job. So the media kind of latched onto us early on. And at some point, some guy actually approached us about trying to pitch a show for us. And that didn't really go anywhere. And then a year later, really the production company just approached us and asked us about doing a show. So that's how it came to be. We just did what we loved. We just kept chasing every year, and somebody just came up and asked if we wanted to do a show, and we're like, sure, let's try it.
I would be kind of weary of that, Melanie, because you know you're on the road. Some guys like, you want to be on a TV show, you know, like
I mean, they
just
contacted
follow me back to the hotel and I'll show you everything.
Yeah. Oh, but it was really an adventure. You know, honestly, we were on the road for 7 weeks straight filming the Twister Sisters.
Wow.
And having that production crew with us, it was fun. But reality TV, I mean, it's mostly real, but we did a lot of things a couple times, right? You know, like drive down the road, turn around, come back and drive again so they can get a couple shots. And as storm chasers, we know we have to be somewhere by a certain time. And they didn't always really fully understand that concept. So sometimes there was a little bit of, debate going on because they needed to get a couple shots and we needed to get to the storm. But overall, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. But honestly, there was a lot more drama behind the scenes than on the camera.
Ooh, sounds good.
I'm always like, if you want a real dramatic show, you should be filming the making of the reality show. But, they were a great crew and we had a lot of fun. But after that 7 weeks, when I went back I was working full time actually as a chemist at the time. And when I went back to work, luckily they gave me time off to do the show because I thought it was really cool. But I went back to work, working full time. And I felt like I was on vacation when I went back to work because chasing with the goal of filming a show like that is just a lot more work than just chasing in itself is a lot of work. But when you have that whole crew and a lot of other things you have to accomplish during that time, it was exhausting, but it was a lot of fun.
Did they have
I
any
think
other?
it had to be because producers want everything.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah,
you got to
I mean,
understand their position. You get it, but what they want and what is feasible are sometimes two different things.
Yeah, and sometimes they wanted to stop to pee, and we were like, "Nope, we can't stop. We got to keep going."
Did they have any other names?
Roping.
Like, was Twister Sisters their first? Or did they have any other names prior to that? They're like, oh yeah, that's not going to work, or like two blonde girls chasing a tornado. I mean,
No, we actually had come up with the name Twister Sisters years before that. So we were operating, just chasing storms. We were known as the Twister Sisters. And then we worked for Fox 9 News as the storm chaser. They're storm chasers for a couple of years. And we were referred to as the Fox 9 Twister Sisters. So it was something we actually came up with. And I guess they liked it. They just wanted to call the show the Twister Sisters. They never suggested any other names, actually.
Welcome to Outbreak, a new live stream format brought to you by the Stormfront Freaks podcast, hosted by me, meteorologist Brady Harris, also known as Stormcat 5. We'll go live on days of extreme weather with the goal of keeping you safe, informed, and entertained. The only question that remains is, are you ready for the outbreak?
tonight we have Jim Tang joining us. He's a landscape photographer from San Francisco, California. And in 2014, he went on his first storm chase. And today he goes storm chasing a few times a year, mainly to the plains in Tornado Alley during the spring tornado season and to Arizona for the summer monsoon. So welcome, Jim. First question, what made you go on that very first storm chase in 2014?
Yeah, it was completely spontaneous. I knew there was a really nice trough, a really nice storm system ejecting out to the plains, and it looked like a multi-day potential tornado outbreak. So kind of like 5 days before it was supposed to happen, I booked a flight, I booked a rental car, and I just kind of went out there and just winged it.
So what made you do that? Is it something that you've always wanted to do? Have you had the interest in weather? What made you click that buy my airline ticket now button?
Yeah, so I've always had an interest in weather. I grew up when I was young. I grew up in Texas, and we get storms all the time. And so I've always had an interest in weather. And I always never felt like I was quote unquote, supposed to go storm chasing. But in 2014, I had been employed for I was out of college for a few years, and I decided, okay, well, I guess this is time. Let's just do it. Let's try it out, see what happens, see if we like it or not. And I went and I loved it, and rest is history.
So did you catch a tornado? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dina.
No, I'm just wondering, like, how did you get yourself prepared? I don't think you went to school for weather. So how do you are you self-taught with models and weather maps and things like that?
Yeah, exactly. I'm pretty much all self-taught. I used to be on a bunch of weather forums, and I'd read discussions from other people. I learned the ropes about, what all these little different parameters are, what to look for on the weather maps. And so, yeah, everything is basically self-taught on my end.
Wow.
If you self-taught yourself calculus, I'm going to be a little pissed. I had to take that. And differential equations and all that. But wow, yeah, it's one of those things, I guess, when you know what you're looking for, that's great.
So have you been in San Francisco your entire life, or where'd you start off, and how have you gotten to where you are?
Yeah, so after I lived in Texas, I moved to Las Vegas for half a year, and then I moved to San Diego for a few years, and then I moved up to San Francisco for college, and then I have stayed here since then.
So was it in Texas that basically you got kind of had the bug? Because it's hard to get that kind of weather bug in California.
Exactly. The irony is I went to the exact city that has the least amount of weather in the entire country. But exactly, Texas is where my love for weather grew up. I used to draw weather maps for fun that involved Texas. I don't know where it came from. It just kind of happened, and it's blossomed since then.
How about the photography side of things? Where did that it's like chicken or the egg, like what came first? Was it the storm chasing or the photography?
Yep, exactly. So photography came along when I was in middle school, I think. My mom gave me kind of like, back in the day, we had these, 1 megapixel small little digital cameras. So she gave me a digital camera to play around on the hike. And I took some photos, and they were great. Or that's what I thought at the time, at least. My love for photography grew from there. So in many ways, my love for weather and my love for photography grew independently. And then when I started storm chasing, those two kind of merged together.
How big was that first digital camera?
It was like a small little. I don't know my measurements, but
it was small, but it was small.
Exactly.
I have to laugh because back in my day, we had Polaroids and film you had to send in to get developed. So.
Well, I was back when you had to click the button, right, MJ, and then right. Smile. All right.
I was gonna say this, MJ. Do you remember the first Apple digital camera that came out, and it was like a set of binoculars or something?
Exactly, absolutely.
Wow. I'm thinking of like the cube, the flash cube. Remember the flash cubes?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
My very first digital camera, it took like one of those floppy disks in the side
Oh,
of it.
sure.
Oh
Right.
my-
Like, do you guys
Aw.
remember that?
Wow. No, I don't
Yeah.
remember that.
Well,
Wow.
I'm gonna be real. I only remember taking pictures on an iPhone, so I don't know.
Brady the baby.
So, because Jim, here's the truth. I have been extremely impressed with your photography, and that's one thing, being a storm chaser, but not a great photographer. I'm very envious of other people that take great shots, because I never do, and that's never really my goal, is to try and get great. I want to get better, don't get me wrong, right? But I don't take great shots. So first off, I'm in awe of the stuff you've done, but where have you, I guess, learned that? Again, has that all been self-taught as well?
Kind of a little bit. So I will say this: storm chasing has an incredibly steep learning curve, right? And so if you're adding on trying to learn photography on top of how to storm chase, on top of how to forecast, right? On top of getting to position, right? It's incredibly difficult. So I was pretty lucky in that I learned these things independently. And so when I started storm chasing, I already had an idea of how to take a quote unquote good photo. So I will say that. And then I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, just kind of self-taught. Was the photography also self-taught in learning that process? And
Yep, precisely, it was.
Wow.
I'm afraid to ask what else you've self-taught yourself.
That's ridiculous.
I've self-taught programming. I've self-taught there's something else that I forgot.
What did you go to school for? Jim, what was your degree?
My degree is in engineering physics.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I guess that makes
That
sense.
So he's not a
That does
dummy.
explain a few things.
Yeah.
Our IQs totaled up is like the same as his. So cool. Okay, good. That's where we are.
But Jim, I looked at your portfolio, and the one thing that struck me out of all the different pictures you take is the lighting, and is perfect.
Yeah.
Like everything is like lit perfectly. Like, is it your? I want to just say it's your skill, but is like, are you picking the right film speed? Is it the camera? Are you lighting them up a little bit later? Tell me a secret.
But first off, thank you all for the really kind words. I'm very flattered.
They're beautiful.
There they are.
Thank you so much. So in terms of lighting, so part of that is getting the exposure right? So storm chasing, the pace is really fast, right? Things happen really quickly. You have to, first of all, the positioning is critical, and second of all, these storms are just a moving target. They're moving all the time. So part of lighting is knowing which settings on the camera, like basically having those settings nailed down, right? If you look at a scene, you can figure out, what's my aperture, what's my shutter speed, what's my ISO, right, from the get-go. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is there's the daytime lighting isn't really that great. It's okay, it works, but for really moody shots, there's a not so secret in photography that you want to shoot around sunset. You want to shoot around what's called blue light, which is the hour after sunset. And so half of lighting, in my opinion, is knowing, okay, well, it's sunset now, it's blue light now, this is go time. Like, I have to be on my game. I have to have my camera ready. I have to be ready to take shots during that kind of 2-hour window to maximize that quality of light.
Wow.
I'm going to have to tell you, Jim, my philosophy of storm chasing is a lot easier. You just look for a storm. It doesn't matter what time of the day is. You're just looking for a frickin' storm. To try and time it, it would be obviously impossible.
Well, that's why the shots look the way they do, man. That's why they're so great.
I know.
Right?
Yeah.
They're even some of the big supercells with the blue light in them. I mean, it almost looks like somebody photoshopped it, but I know you didn't. But it's I'm like, how did he get that? Because what kind of camera do you use?
So I have right now I have two cameras. I have a Nikon D850 and a Nikon D750. Both are full frame DSLRs, and that's another thing that I wanted to bring up is that people there's multiple sides to the argument. Oh, does this equipment matter, right, as much as but equipment does help with low lighting conditions, especially that period after sunset, right? If you can photograph things with a higher ISO, you can get some really good shots. But the trade-off is if you don't have one of these full DSLRs, if you don't have a full frame camera, you get a lot of noise, and that degrades the quality of the image. So, yeah.
So what I heard from that, Jim, is equipment really matters.
I was thinking the
It
same
does
thing.
matter
It's
to an
important.
extent. It does matter.
Your equipment really matters. Okay.
Yeah.
So now that we got that out of the way,
So Jim, I got a question. When you go out to I guess you're already out west. When you go east to storm chase, what does that usually look like? Are you usually going for like a week at a time, or like what are your trips and how many do you usually make a year?
Yeah, it's a good question. So before 2020, I took 2-week trips every year. So it was basically late May, 2 weeks, take a chasecation, and try to hope that there are storms in that window. So what I've realized is sometimes the storms sometimes the storms aren't there, right? And the other thing that I've realized is that at the end of that 2-week window, you're really burnt out, or at least I am. I don't know about other people, but I'm like really tired at the end of those 2 weeks, and I'm not really good at chasing when I'm like completely dead and tired. So nowadays what I try to do is I try to take I try to optimize first of all, I have a new base out in Denver, and that helps a lot because I don't have to fly from San Francisco back out to the plains every time. But I have a base in Denver, and I will take like a few days trips. Like I would take a 3 or 4 day chase trip down to, if it's in Texas or North Dakota, if there are setups lined up in a row. So that's how I kind of execute that nowadays.
Yeah, that's smart. Do you usually go alone, or you usually go with like a group of people, or?
And nowadays I usually go alone, especially since 2020 with this pandemic, right? So so nowadays I chase alone. Before 2020, I used to chase with a friend from San Francisco. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Well,
solo chaser.
Yeah.
Right. What are the pluses and minuses in your eyes to doing it alone?
Yeah, good question. So the pluses, I get to do whatever I want, right? If I bust, I bust alone. That's I preach that to everyone, right? Like if I chase with someone else, if I bust because of my decision, or if I bust because of someone else's decision, it both feel pretty terrible. So that's the main plus.
That's like a positive negative.
It's the negation of the negative.
The highs are really high and the lows are really low because it's your fault, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The negatives are I'm trying to do everything at once, right? I gotta drive, I gotta take photos, I gotta
it's a lot.
It's a lot.
Especially when you have a tornado barreling at you, right?
Especially when you have a tornado barreling at you, right? I always have to, whenever there's a tornado in front of me, I'm like, do I take video? Do I take photos? What do I do, right? What do I prioritize? So if with someone else, you can kind of split those responsibilities.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim, the one thing I was wondering I didn't see in your portfolio, but since you're in California, have you done a lot of photography of the wildfires? Because those are always so like, wow, when you see that, but that's also very dangerous. So have you done any of the fire photography?
Yeah, a little bit actually. So first, so in 2020, I met up with a friend, and we actually went pretty close to one of the lightning fires back in August 2020. So I've done a little bit of it. It's a little more logistically challenging than chasing other forms of weather. Number one is fire is a lot more dangerous. Like tornadoes, you can always run away from, right? If the fire catches you, you're done, right? So I learned storm chasing by myself, but I would not do the same with chasing a wildfire, right? Like that would be fairly irresponsible in my eyes, and so I would chase with someone. But they also have media obligations. If you're chasing wildfires, you're usually having some sort of media obligations. Because if you don't, and you're just there for funsies, right? like there's you could be potentially interfering with firefighting, excuse me, firefighting crews. You could be interfering with emergency services. So that gets pretty complex. Like, I would love to chase more wildfires, but it's challenging. It's a different level of difficulty.
Yeah, because it's not like there's a radar you can look at and say, "Oh, where's the fire at now?" You know,
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
yeah, you're just kind of guessing, and then you don't want to end up in the wrong place at the wrong time. So,
Exactly.
well, Jim, how was 2021 for you from a chasing perspective? You know, did you see a lot of good storms, get a lot of good photographs, or how was it for you?
Yeah, 2021 was my best year. So just some background, right? I've had a traditionally poor luck with timing my chasing periods. So in 2017, I went out for 2 weeks. There were no storms. In
Oh,
2018, in 2018, I went out for 2 weeks. There were like a couple of setups, but again, mostly no storms. In 2019, I finally timed it well, but it was a year with a lot of smoke, a lot of flooding, a lot of logistical challenges. And then 2020, we all know what happened that year. So this year was definitely my best year from a chasing perspective. I was able to catch a bunch of tornado days from Texas and North Dakota. So I was very fortunate this year.
What was your most memorable chase out of 2021?
Ooh, I have so many really good memorable chases. I would say it's a tie between mid-May and early June. So mid-May, that was the Earth Texas event. That was maybe my best forecast I've ever made. I think I targeted Lubbock that day from the get-go. So that was very memorable because that gave me the confidence to have confidence in my own forecast. That gave me,
There you go. Well, yeah, after a year and a
Um,
half off, you got to get your mojo back, right?
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. And then June, I went on a trip to Montana, but on the way, I accidentally found a tornado right outside my backyard in Denver, and that was just
That sucks.
absolutely incredible. I know, right? It's terrible.
And you're talking to some guy who's never seen a tornado. That's not fair, man. That is not fair. That's bull.
I know, right? But I was really lucky there. And then June 10th, I think I had one of my best chases ever. There was a tornado underneath this massive sculpted supercell. It's just an incredible structure tornado combination that I had never seen before. So that was just memorable. My best chase ever.
Jim, tell me about your Lubbock day then in your forecasting. How did you start the day? What are you using? What did how'd you pick your target? Kind of what are the tools and walk us through that for yourself.
Yeah. So I started the morning in Lamar, Colorado. And I knew I had to drive south. There were a few targets on that day. There was a panhandle target around Amarillo. And then there was a target further south near Lubbock. And one thing I noticed is that if we looked at the 500 millibar winds, the 500 millibar flow up near Amarillo was a lot weaker. It was around 20 knots, which is pretty bad. And down near Midland, it was a little bit better, around 35 knots. So I knew that, first of all, whatever target I made, I would be biased south. I did not want to stay near Amarillo. And then the other thing I noticed that morning was that there were 65 dew points all the way west to New Mexico, which is really good. So the moisture quality was really, really good. And my philosophy is, if you get supercell and you have good moisture, that usually does good things, almost regardless of anything else. That's my philosophy. So I knew that, if we could get a really good isolated supercell in that quality moisture, there'd be a chance of magic. And so I drove all the way down to is it Plainview or Plainfield? It's like the town north of Lubbock on I-27. So I stopped there, right up with a few friends, and they were kind of, and at that point, there were storms around Amarillo, but as predicted, they were fairly messy. It was a sign of weak shear. So I had a choice to decide between what looked like some towers developing to the west, but also the HER model was developing thunderstorms a little further south towards La Mesa. And so I kind of just stayed there and didn't do anything because I wasn't sure like where to go south or go west. And in the end, I was almost about to bail south because I felt like, oh, if I choose these towers to the west and the stuff near La Mesa blows up and does really good things, then I'm gonna look like a clown. But I kind of just stuck to my guns and then I went west, and the rest is history.
Thank you for tuning in to the Stormfront Freaks podcast. You can watch our bi-weekly show live on youtube.com/stormfrontfreaks and download the audio version on your favorite podcast player. For links to our Patreon team of exclusive benefits, show notes, past shows, new videos, merchandise, and more, visit our website at stormfrontfreaks.com. While you're there, check out our interactive chaser radar from our friends at zoomradar.com. If you'd like to contact us with questions or make comments about the show, shoot us an email to questions@stormfrontfreaks.com or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. Search for Stormfront Freaks. We'd love to hear from you. Join us next time and tell a friend about the Stormfront Freaks podcast.